We are back online. I'm Fauzi. You are Nick,
I'm Nick, and it makes
and
it sound like we just sit here waiting to do this, and when we're offline, we're just waiting to come back online.
I
So
feel like I should have done a bit of warm-ups. I'm a little bit. It's been a long day. I know you had a big week last week, and we're a day late, right? We're a day behind now. So sorry that you people
should
had to wait
feels
24
like we
hours for
should just
extra content.
feels like we should just phone it in, man. I listen. So this is a weird thing. I don't normally watch our videos just because I don't want to be 20% of our viewership. So I actually watched back a little bit, and I feel like we should probably, as a potential content thing in an off season, we should watch our first video back a little bit, like
Yeah,
I think it's the Chris Paul or Westbrook one or something,
the Westbrook one.
and it's interesting to see how more fluid we are, how much better we are at turn taking, and
I,
being a little bit more interesting.
I feel
So
I would have looked a bit younger too a few years ago, correct?
I actually probably am rocking the same shirts, and I use the same Google background, so it's hard to tell that I've moved a couple of times. But
Well,
yeah,
I'm definitely in a different country, so
yeah, that's huge.
mine's my life has changed a little bit there. But hey, look, maybe some of these lives for these players that we're going to talk about dropping right now,
What a segue.
it has, I
We're about
think
to
I think
change
that
theirs.
their situation has clearly changed here, and I'm like, I've just gone cold on them. I don't know. Do you want me to start? Shall I start? I got two names like that are high on
You,
my list. Yeah, yeah.
I feel like you got
Okay.
some grievances
All
to
right. Yeah.
air, and I feel like I'm going to echo them because I know who you're talking about
Washington
already.
Wizards, what's going on here, man? Like, Bob Carrington, he's your future. Why have you sent him back to the bench? Yeah, I don't care how young he is. You just got to give him an opportunity. You guys surely are hoping for Cooper Flag, like probably six other lottery teams are in that sort of sense. And it makes no sense that you guys are sending him to the bench. So, but from a greater realities perspective, my first candidate to drop here is Bob Carrington from the Washington Wizards here. He's you know, I know he's got lots to learn, but I thought he was he was doing some good stuff. He reminds me of GG Jackson. Remember GG Jackson
Hmm.
last year, and obviously the the Grizzlies were obviously injured, so he got a lot of minutes, and he was young as well. And he, like, from a fantasy perspective, obviously put out some reasonable numbers. I'm trying to find where this is, but yeah, it's like that's my first drop candidate, man. Right now, unless he gets that starting spot again, maybe say after the All Star break, maybe it then turns into a watch again.
Yeah, he went from a string of 30 or more minute per games, and now he's actually struggling to get more than a half of basketball. And we kind of know of young players that they need to get the reps in. So in his last game against Indy, 22 minutes to give you 5 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block, which is actually great fantasy value for the amount of minutes he played. And if he gets 10 more minutes, he probably adds a bit more to those categories. But yeah, all right.
My second one here is, oh man, I don't, you might not agree with this, man, but I went and dropped Dick, Grady Dick, because he was just killing my percentages. That's my second nominee. I got two nominees this week. Yeah, it's like I don't think Grady Dick is actually worth holding unless you just want like a rich man's Peyton Pritchard, or you want like maybe like a clone of DiVincenzo, or one of these gunners out there. And these gunners out there are actually gettable. And I guess being realistic again, Scotty Barnes is back now. He'll inherit probably number one option on the Raptors. Obviously, RJ Barrett has been there. He's a bit of a vet there. He'll continue to get these minutes. He's also shooting quite poorly too. All right, and I had both of these players, so that was both of them were cratering my percentages, and I love percentages. That's an area that I like to focus on to win fantasy. And then obviously Emmanuel quickly will be back at some point in the near future. So Grady Dick now feels like the odd man out. So you had a hot patch. I think it was definitely worth riding for a while, but I'm saying right now Grady Dick is a drop. I don't know, man. What do you think, man? Maybe you're gonna go grab him because I dropped him. I don't know.
Definitely not going to grab your dick there. So he had a nice string of games where he had 30, 31, 22, 26, but he was filling out the box score and everything else. He gets you some rebounds,
Mm,
assists, and some
mm.
stocks. And, excuse me. Then he had a down game. You expect that for a youngin. Then he kind of went back to teen digits, another 30 bomb. But it's starting to plateau out. And the concerning thing for him is his minutes haven't changed. So he's actually consistently getting over 30 minutes, but his production seems to be going down a bit. And I think the logical assumption, haven't watched Toronto games, so can't cement this, but, teams when they play Toronto, that should be an easy win on the schedule, but you still need to do a little bit of homework. And Grady Dick, for a period of time there, along with RJ Barrett, was a
Mm.
significant contributor to their offense. And coaches watch a handful of games, figure out some tendencies, and then they start to adjust for it. And that might be why you're also seeing lower percentages too. So
I think last
it's
last 6 games he hasn't cracked 45%. I
no.
can't
And
can't handle that. That was it for me.
well, depending on the size of your league as well, like we have guys in our league that average 15 points, right, on better percentages in our league currently, and that's a 10-man league. So, he's not like a you have to hold him. Maybe in a 14 category, it's a different scenario, but for us in
True,
our context, it's there.
true, true.
Well, he was actually on my list, so I had him on my list as well. I normally just go through the waiver wire, see who's potentially been dropped, and that was my rationale for him. So I'll skip him because we've already talked about the Dick enough. So my next one, this was a player that started off high for me and has just absolutely fizzled out, and it's Rui Hachimura. He's only recently returned from an ankle injury, but even prior to that, the stats started to drop off. When he started the season, I really had a strong 18 and 8 vibe. I really thought maybe he was going to figure it out. Maybe JJ's unlocked something. He sprinkles in a 3 or 2, gives you a steal or 2. Um, but after the first 2 games, he really struggled to keep it going and consistently getting single digits. And the concerning thing in that is he was getting 30 minutes a game. And then his most recent game against Denver, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal in 22 minutes. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just probably not worth a roster slot. So
He's
the
also shooting
24% of people,
43% at the moment from the field, which is down from 53% from last season.
yeah, and also and theoretically is a big, right? But obviously the focal point in their offense is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis at this point remains healthy, but I wouldn't be confident that AD goes down, Rui steps up. So I'm also saying drop to him. And then last one, we've probably both looked at this person and we've both had him on our rosters in our previous things, but it's Nick Claxton for the Brooklyn Nets. So Brooklyn's a really fascinating team because they're very similar to Toronto, in which it's a bit of a wild west and anybody can get numbers. And Nick Claxton this season, in my opinion, has been a little bit disappointing. You kind of get Nick Claxton for the potential double double and 2 blocks, and the blocks weren't as steady as they have been in previous seasons. But even the double double potential isn't. So that you look at the box score. There's a game with 16 and 12, and then there's a game with 3 and 5. And his minutes are pretty consistent. So he's actually really up and down. And he's now currently dealing with a back injury, and he's back to being listed day to day. And I think that was the reason why I gave up on him last season. And I'm not encouraging people to give up on Nick Claxton, but I would give up on Nick Claxton.
I think Claxton has been a case where he felt that he had a higher upside, but if your offensive game doesn't really develop, then I think that's a little bit limited. He's probably almost like your vet version of like Derek Lively. We were just talking about him offline,
Mm.
right? So, that sort of 10 to 7 sort of range for points and rebounds, but you can grab that sort of production in sort of many different forms. I think that's sort of what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also he has a point guard theoretically to help him, which is Ben Simmons. But other than that, he's on a very guard and wing dominant team. So I just don't see the production going up.
I get it. I get it. Well, look, we're not going to get all negative about these drops. Let's look at some holds, right? Some holds, and I
Let's
think
hold on to some people. It's a
uh,
shame we're not holding on to one of the previous players, but that's okay. It's all
but
good. Gotta
I
let it
guess
go.
I'm going to just be the one that says it now. Right now, if you're still looking at DeJounte Murray, you're holding him. Yeah. He's back. We'll be back soon. I'm excited. Obviously, I picked up from a waiver wire. Thanks, Keith. Yeah. I don't know if I should really thank Keith so much for RJ Barrett. I feel torn now with RJ Barrett. Like, you look at his stats across the board, he does some really nice things, and then you look at his percentages and I want to throw up. But, maybe I just gotta just, live with that. But anyway, look. It does do some good things there, but I'm talking about DeJounte Murray, obviously not RJ Barrett. DeJounte Murray, I think, is going to really get hot. As long as he stays, healthy, hopefully he doesn't get injured. Okay, and the Pelicans now need to just go crazy. Yeah, that's the reality. It's a situation where they're like 10 games now or so below in the in the West, and that's almost like a death, sentence at this point of the season, even 20 games in, being in the West and being that far down. But CJ McCollum is back. Okay, DeJounte Murray, hopefully we're back probably in the next 7 to 14 days, I think. Yeah. I think he's ramping up activity and stuff like that too. And I think there's going to be lots of touches for him. And I think the Pelicans will go off. Zion's going to be out indefinitely. Who knows? Yeah, if we even see him again this season, that wouldn't be shock horror. But I think DeJounte Murray right now is a hold. If you're considering him, if he's somehow sitting out there, some leagues dropped him and he's sitting there, go grab him right now.
Without getting into a whole tangent about the New Orleans Pelicans, it's still early enough that they can be competitive, be play in sort of frisky, or even play off frisky with how competitive the West is. Brandon Ingram's not that guy. So Brandon Ingram's had enough of a stretch here to potentially lead the team, and he hasn't. And so I would, from a coaching standpoint, try something different with the return of DeJounte. Easing back into it for sure. It'll be interesting. He's actually targeting a return on Wednesday against the Raptors. So our Thursday, you will have some stats from DeJounte Murray. So
I gotta get him.
good luck.
I gotta get
That
him
feels
activated.
quicker. That feels like a quicker payoff. I feel like it wasn't that long ago we were talking about him, but that's the
Patience,
joys
a
of
little bit of patience,
time.
yeah. Early season patience. But
That's
hey,
pays off.
maybe this is a bit of early season patience for my next two candidates. I've loaded them on my screen, obviously, but you can't see my screen, I know. And
Nope.
a few weeks ago, I talked about dropping every single Buck candidate except Giannis and except Dame Lillard, yeah. And I was
Yep.
totally sold on that. Yeah? The Bucks were cratering at that point, and it was like there was just no production across the board. But hey, suddenly I love the Bucks again, yeah. And they're suddenly like I think 8 and 9 or something like that. They're suddenly in the East. They're like just starting to warm up, and by the time we get to next year, we would have all forgotten about the factor at some point 3-8 or 3-9 or something. I think that's probably the reality. And maybe the first candidate here is Brook Lopez has become Brook Lopez. I think the first few weeks I was looking at sort of options, and center's a real tricky position in fantasy, man, because you have limits. Yeah, that's a default
Yep.
set situation. You can take that away, but obviously as a default setting in fantasy league, there's a limit on centers, and obviously, you have to decide where do you feel your center spot because of that limit. Yeah. Last season, obviously, yeah, one of my gripes was those limits on every position. That was extremely challenging in many different respects. But obviously, look, and Brook Lopez in the last few games now, I think I'm just quick pull out his stats here. The last like 6 games now, he's hit like double digits 5 of those times. He's hit 23 of those times there. He's starting to make threes. He's starting to shoot over 50% in about 4 of those 6 games there, and he's getting blocks again. Yeah, do you remember
Mm.
Brook Lopez was a defensive of the year candidate? That feels like a lifetime
He was
ago.
a
Yeah,
he was a blocks leader though
yeah,
last season
it
almost. Like it
crazy, right?
wasn't that long ago.
So the last few games here, obviously, he's at 3-1-1-4-1-5-3, yeah, and so those sort of numbers there are suddenly like this guy's productive. So again, I think definitely a hold option there. If you've got Brook Lopez right now, you're like, oh, I'm damn glad I held him. And if you're somehow sitting on a waiver wire out there, definitely, and you've got a center spot, you could definitely look at Brook Lopez. And I guess the second name here, I guess in Milwaukee, is Gary Trent Jr. I've been watching this guy as well. He's like, again, similar to the Grady Dick situation. He feels like he played that similar role in Toronto. Obviously, just a gunner out there, and he came to Milwaukee, and he really did not much for the first few weeks either, which is obviously probably a big part of why they were struggling. But again, the last 6 games here, he hit double digits in the last 6 games. Let's look at his threes: 4, 6, 3, 4, 2, 3. Yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah, okay, so that's probably actually better production than Grady Dick. Yeah, so again, I think this is a guy that if you still got him on your roster there, you're sort of reaping the rewards of being patient with these two bucks right now. I think he'll start to trend upwards. Whether he gets back in the starting lineup or not, I don't know. Maybe he's better off just coming off the bench and just being that sort of six-man sort of sharpshooter. He's definitely someone I think that hold him right now if you still got him.
Well, just to highlight the Bucks a little bit, just looking at the box scores, both Brook and Gary Trent, you mentioned them because they started to take off about 2 weeks ago, according to dates. And sometimes I think we can get a little bit hung up in scheduling. And what I mean by hung up is we don't realize how important the scheduling is. Uh, Boston, Memphis, Cleveland, that's a hard run based off how the season has now panned out. You don't know how hard a schedule is in the early days because you don't know which teams are good and which ones aren't. But they beat up on Toronto, Detroit, Charlotte twice, Houston, who's actually pretty good. and then Chicago and Indy. So they've had a good run against good teams and started to build some momentum. It could be a time to invest because most of these players will be on the waiver wire because you told people to drop them last week. So that's easy. Anyone else, or am I
That's it.
taking
That's
over?
it. They're my few
All right.
names.
So this is the first one is someone who's in our waiver wire currently, but it is due to injury. It's Zach Eady.
He got dropped today, right?
Dropped a day or two ago. As Edie hurt his ankle twice or three times in the same game, and it didn't look good. And it's a classic scenario of he's a really big dude, and he's young and all that jazz, and there's probably no need to rush him back. But the reason why Edie is an interesting one, it's not because of that one game against Brooklyn where he popped off. It's because like he averaged basically a block and a steal and 11 points and 7 rebounds in limited action. And so the thing was, every game where he got into foul trouble or struggled to stay on the court, he still gave you almost a double double in stocks. And if he did get to play more because of the situation or because he didn't get the foul trouble, that's actually when you saw a trend upward in his stats. And the reason why I'm saying hold is because depending on what your league is looking like, it's only week 5 or 6. So you have 20 games in the season. If he takes up a roster slot and you lose because you have Zach Edey rostered, again, it begs the question, can you afford this many injuries? But for me, if I was in a position to pick him up, I'd just stash him right now on my bench because I have a little bit of a lead and I could afford to lose a category or two and keep my record pumping. But just the potential just feels there, similar to how you feel about Donovan Kungain as well when you were talking about that off screen. Just there's there's something there that's worth holding on to because they won't be on the waiver wire if they string together 3 good games in a row. That's their talent level. So that's my first one. The second is Cam Johnson. I really have not paid much attention to Cam Johnson, and then if you open up his box score now, and the
Yeah,
viewer
it's
will see
warming
it
up. It's
too.
warming up, I think.
So he's just hurt his ankle. He just hurt his ankle. But he was already on track to have a good game there. Just 14 minutes, had 5 points on good shooting and 2-2-1. He plays in the flow of the game, and he always did that in Phoenix, and he's doing it here now in Brooklyn while Schroeder and Cam Thomas run the show. And you look at the last like 5 games, his lowest output is 16 points, his highest is 37, but he gives you threes, he shoots a good clip, and he actually seems to give you steals pretty much every time he's out there, and he might give you a block from here or there. But I just think for a guy who can play 2 different positions, for a team that's not really trying to do anything, just someone interesting to hold on to. And the reason why I said hold is because yeah, he's hurt his ankle, but I'm sure he'll be fine. Let's not overreact, and that covers our what to do. What the hell do I do with Cam Johnson? Because that's not worth a segment. And then my last one is Yusuf Nurkic. So Yusuf Nurkic's box score is absolutely erratic.
Yep.
And so he's been a little bit in and out of the lineup. He's also been a little bit in and out of the minutes. There seems to be certain games that he doesn't play more than 15 minutes, and typically those teams seem to have a good big. I'm looking at them currently. Gobert kept him to 14 minutes. DeMontis kept him to 15, and AD kept him to 15. But when he isn't facing a big that he can't handle, he gives you some really interesting stats. So there was that monster 20 and 18 game against Miami. There was a 15 and 15 against Philly. There was a 3 and 15 against Portland, but probably the most recent one is quite appealing. 14 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. This is a guy who's running around on a court with one really good player, currently in Devin Booker, but then can have the potential to be with KD and Beal. And the categories he stuffs, he will give you probably 10 points because he just gets offensive rebounds or will get an easy slip, but he gives you good shooting and rebounds and all that. The reason why I'm saying hold as well is also a little bit of a watch. He's actually only rostered on 54% of rosters. So there's a 50-50 chance that he's currently sitting in your waiver wire too. So that's that's my three. Those are
It's
my three
funny. It's
hold.
funny you flagged Nurkic. Obviously, having a look at his stats there, you are right. He is wildly inconsistent, and maybe in part because of his minutes in that sort of sense. It's interesting that he gets actually quite a fair few steals. He gave me some deja vu of Steven Adams when he was
Yeah.
sort of prime Steven Adams. He was like a big man that probably gave you more steals than blocks. And I did sort of pick him up here and there in fantasy many, many years ago now. And Nurkic sort of gives you the same sort of vibe, I think, in that sort of sense. Yeah, look, I guess you could do worse. You could do worse, in that sort of sense. Again, it's that center spot though. Yeah, you only got limited options. Do you want to burn a spot in a center spot on a bit of an inconsistent production sort of player? I don't know, in that sense. Um, I guess look, going to a watch list here. I've got two names here. Let me bring them up firstly. First one here, which is actually probably the opposite of the drops sort of situation, because I'm being non-biased at all. As much as I hated the fact that I had to drop, or I'm going to probably have to drop Bob Carrington at this point. I think I've got him in my 14-man league. Is that he got shafted out of the starting lineup because of the return of Malcolm Brogdon. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Malcolm Brogdon, he was actually a solid player actually. He's 31 now. Had a bit of injury since he left the Celtics, and hopefully he stays healthy. But he's come back now. Played a couple of games, 2 games, 18 points, 15 points, 10 rebounds in his first game. He's still getting going. He's always been solid as a percentage from a percentage perspective. I don't think he does anything crazy. He's almost like a Derek White light, which is ironic because I think he exited and Derek White then came into the Celtics, right? And look, I think he's still going to get opportunity by the looks of it. They've slid him straight away into the starting lineup now for the Wizards. I think they're going to ride him for a while, at least let's say to the All-Star break. Maybe they're trying to inflate his trade value.
They're
Yeah,
trying to get the trade value.
correct. So if they can see that he can, help a contending team, maybe they can flip him for a second round pick or something like that, or maybe a young prospect, in that sort of sense. So look, makes sense, I guess, from that aspect for the Wizards there. I think it's always decisions you've got to make there. But I think from a fantasy perspective, if you're looking for a guard here that is definitely worth a watch, I got Malcolm Brogdon on my list.
I don't, and I'll sneak in real quick for the listener. Malcolm Brogdon will get injured, and he is a temporary stream. But thanks for your effort. Let's keep going.
You reckon he's going to get injured? You want to put money on that? Why do you reckon he's going to get injured?
I just feel it in my bones, in my bone bruise.
That's why
We'll
he's a
get to that.
watch. He's a watch. This is not
Yeah,
the
I'd
section
watch
where
him
please
get injured.
lock him in for the rest of this season. He's a
No,
guaranteed,
watch him.
machine.
Waste of effort to watch him. You can watch him get injured. That's what's going to happen. I'm sorry to say it. Keep going.
All right. Next player here I'm going to nominate, and we talked about him maybe at the start. In fact, he was maybe a drop, and now we're shifting him to a watch because he got healthy here. Osar Thompson is back. Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah.
I guess that's obviously positive to see. I think at the start when we were talking about he's a drop candidate, there was always uncertainty. When would he come back? And they never really give out that sort of information, firm timelines and things like this. But so we were sort of like, will he be back Christmas or New Year's even? Who knows, right? But he's obviously coming back from a fairly solid rookie campaign. And I think, like I said, he's only, I think, got 1 game under his belt. No doubt it's probably a minutes restriction. But, Detroit now are starting to slide backwards. Let's be realistic. At some point, they're going to start to look at what the future is. This team, at some point, was, I think, at 500, maybe 7-7 or something like that. And it was like, oh, they're like probably thinking, like, can we make a play in or something like this? But I think that's highly unrealistic in the longer term picture, especially with Cade Cunningham out now as well. I think they're going to sort of fall behind in the pack there, I guess. And I think also Thompson definitely is a watch candidate here. That if he can sort of build slightly on his rookie campaign, and continue to just get minutes and a role there, he's definitely a player that you should be able to add, especially in a deep league.
If he can mimic what his brother is currently doing in Houston, with that stocks potential, that's the allure, right?
What do you have, my man?
Oh, right. I forget that you have two. I feel like I should stop doing three. It's a lot of effort to get three. So my first one is, funnily enough, a player that we had mentioned on the drop list, but it's Denny Abaja. I feel like since we spoke about it, he was 7 points, 9 points, 9 points, and 0 points. And then clearly a listener of the podcast, which is encouraging because we need someone in the league to listen to us, but really strung together double-digit games, 12, 13, 13, 14, 17. The minutes did go up a little bit in a couple of games, but they stay consistent in the others. But it's the fact that the rebounds have bumped up. So now he's getting close to about 7 rebounds a game. The assists kind of still fluctuate, but also the stocks went up as well. And he had a really nice stat line against Houston where he gave you 14 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and 4 blocks. That's kind of what I think Portland envisioned with him. And if you scroll down the list, he had a game on Halloween against the Clippers where he had 13 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks. That's, I think, why people have him rostered 42% of the time. I think that's why people drafted him, because there's that weird potential for him. But he's been a little bit up and down. Portland is a very odd team. I have to cover them a lot in our daily videos, and those box scores are erratic. Like Shaden Sharp comes back for 2 games, pops off, disappears. Clingayan has that 19 rebound game and then is now injured. And Jeremy Grant has a 20-point game and then a 5-point game. So Advajar is starting to cement himself as a consistent performer on that team. It's a watch because he could go completely backwards, and then it's valid in what I said before. So
Well, the thing is, he's not a young guy, and he's been around fifth season now, and he's trended upwards. 14 points last season, 7 rebounds, couple of assists, a few of those stocks as well. Um, I don't know. I think he's off to a bit of a slow start, maybe in Portland, right? Isn't that what we talked about?
yeah, and I don't think Portland truly knows who they want to be or what they want to do, because they've got Scoot who's now injured again, and they really want to get him minutes. But then I think they realize they can't give him too many minutes because he just turns it over so much and shoots so poorly. So I don't envy Portland. Unfortunately, I don't think they've done what they wanted to do with this rebuild. But enough about them. Let's talk about another team that doesn't know what the hell's going on. It's the New Orleans Pelicans. Trey Murphy the third. Now you might be thinking, dude, everyone loves this guy. Yeah, well, unfortunately, only 30% of people love him because he's not rostered in 70% of leagues. And he's currently sitting on our waiver wire. And the allure of him is he is currently averaging, at least in the last 7 days, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and almost a block, and only 1 turnover a game, and gives you some threes and that. Currently, he's the only person on the Pelicans besides Brandon Ingram that people would probably know. So he's currently getting a lot of minutes. The one thing that I'm going to say watch, and because those stats jump off the page, surely you take him, right? Well, the watch here is he had a hamstring injury and he's not playing him back to back. So that's why there's gaps in his box score. If they're the day after, he's not going to play those games. And with the return of DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum, his role is going to shift as well. And, maybe his stocks will go up because he can channel more energy into that. Maybe his offense will stay the same. Uh, but could be a really good steal for anyone who's interested. But I just want to flag this as well. Not trying to do a Dr. Nick segment just here, but hamstring injuries, man, like they either are just a one and done and you're all good, or they are recurring. And Tyrese Halliburton's a good example of recurring hamstring. Hurts it in the regular season, comes back, hurts it in the playoffs, and then potentially has hurt it in the Olympics. I was reading today. If Trey Murphy's come back, I'm sure he's good. But New Orleans, that medical staff, I don't know. You've got to look at New Orleans a little different this season. Something's going on there. And then my last one, I am aware of my weakness in threes in the league. And so I was looking around at who was on our waiver wire who has a lot of threes. And I stumbled across a player who I was actually pleasantly surprised with the stats and felt like everyone should hear this. Malik Beasley, who currently plays in Detroit, is only rostered on 21% of rosters. And his averages are 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, almost a steal, hasn't blocked a shot this season, and doesn't turn it over more than 1.7 times. There was a nice string, so I feel like I'm a bit late to the watch party, but there was a nice string where he had 20 points in several games. But the main reason why I flagged him, he's actually got 68 3-pointers made on the season, and he's shooting a pretty good clip, considering we were talking about some bigs before shooting 43%. He shoots 40% overall. I just feel like he's a good watch candidate, and by a watch, I mean you could pick him up today if that's your need. Probably the biggest limitation, he's just a shooting guard, so they're always hard.
You're right. He again. You could put Malik Beasley with the same conversation we just had before about Grady Dick and Gary
Mm.
Trent and Dante DiVincenzo, Peyton Pritchard. Yeah, these are all that sort of six man. Sometimes they start gunners. If they get 5+3s in a game, not shock horror, great benefit to you. They might get 15, 20 points. That's a win. They don't do much else. Sometimes they're in the peripherals. And then sometimes they have those games because of the gunner. They go out there and they shoot 3 from 15. Yeah, and then you sort of have to absorb that. So, yeah, look, definitely a good one there. I like Malik Beasley. I think that's a good one. I think with the Trey Murphy one, I've got Trey Murphy in my 40-man league, and look,
You
you'd
haven't
like
taken
more
the
from
flyer on him this one, huh?
yeah, you'd like more from him. But you sort of accept that he is probably he's not a number one option. Yeah, he's like your third,
No,
fourth option on a team. Yeah. Okay.
he's a stocks and threes guy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So it'll be more interesting to see the production once, hopefully New Orleans gets fairly healthy. Yeah, let's say hopefully everyone but Zion is healthy, and then Trey Murphy slots into that, and then can he be a bit more consistent? Get his 15 and 5, and maybe so something like 15 and 5 and 5 with a couple of threes as well, and maybe a steal. Yeah, then you're probably going, hey, that's a good production from Trey Murphy.
nice.
I
We
like it.
just held, dropped, and watched some players.